This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Huge weekend for Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith at the party's AGM, the UCP AGM down in Red Deer. More than 6,000 people there. Big gathering by Canadian political standards, and a stunning outcome, I think, at least for Smith's critics, who many of them were predicting that she'd face the wrath of the party's right-wing flank. If you haven't heard already, and I doubt that's the case, a 91.5%. We'll round up and call it a 92% approval rating.
Let's just call it 100.
I
Jesus.
mean, 92% for Danielle Smith in front of a packed house at Westerner Park in Red Deer. And we're going to get into that today. I'm curious to see what the Real Talk live chat says, as well as emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com. You have to assume that this will shut up the critics of Danielle Smith within the party for a while, but I'm already seeing some strong messaging from NDP supporters that want to sort of argue how this stacks up against Nenshi's big 86% victory in that party's leadership vote. Of course, with other candidates in the mix, 86%, nothing to scoff at. What's the more significant number? Who achieved the stronger show of support? You know, fall session's underway at the Alberta legislature. Nenshi's not there in the House, doesn't have a seat yet. But what momentum does this create for Danielle Smith? I mean, in a short answer, a ton. We'll get into that in just a bit. Plus, Collin May joins us today. He's the former chair of the Alberta Human Rights Commission. You're going, why do I recognize that name? Why do I recognize? Right. He was fired by Tyler Shandro in a pretty high-profile scenario. Mr. May reached out to the show. He says that our conversation about that so-called Jordan Peterson Law that Danielle Smith has promised Albertans, the law that'll protect, she says, free speech for professionals like psychologists or presumably surgeons or engineers or anybody else that falls under the purvey of a governing body. She'll protect their free speech. Of course, this all based on, or at least named after, Jordan Peterson's scenario, where he's faced the ire of the Ontario College of Psychologists after, of course, some social media posts. They said he requires social media training, and he's turned it into some pretty prominent headlines for himself. Ultimately, is this a law that anybody's looking for? Who knows? I've said my bit on it. Mr. May says we're missing the mark a little bit, and this is his wheelhouse, so we'll get into it with him before this episode's up. This episode of Real Talk made possible with the support of Alberta's top online real estate school. That's Relo, RELO.ca. That's where better real estate training starts. What sets Relo apart from all the others? Well, it's real estate learning online for the bold and ambitious. They are the only real estate school that sets you up with a professional practice network, professional development webinars, plus a whole lot more through their Reco system community. You can check out their pre-licensing courses online. And I want to put this on your radar. We're always looking for ways to get you one step ahead of everybody else. If you're looking at the Alberta Commercial Real Estate Bundle, the Alberta Residential Real Estate Bundle, if you use the promo code Ryan100 when you sign up, it's going to knock $100 off each of those courses. That's Ryan100, all one word, when you get your real estate career started today at Relo.ca. Premier Danielle Smith has mentioned a stunning 91.5% endorsement, Johnny, in her leadership review. To put that into perspective, like you said, might as well be 100. It feels like kind of a near sweep.
Yeah.
Basically a resounding seal of approval from her party. So, people will be talking about today what it means, first of all, for the Premier, for her leadership. What it means for her leadership is that it's secure right now and into the foreseeable future. And maybe more notably, her critics within the United Conservative Party. What does that mean for them? So there's no denying her political savvy. She, I wasn't there, but it sounds like on Saturday night kind of went into an impromptu speech that wasn't planned, and basically just addressed the crowd. She knows what sort of narrative that she wants heading into this fall session into 2025. Kind of a polarizing tenure so far, I think, for the Premier, with taking on everything from federal provincial relations, which is kind of a relatively worn playbook in Alberta, but it's effective. Questions about professional regulators, like we were just talking about, the legislation around pronouns and parents and kids and gender reassignment surgery and puberty blockers and that. I mean, we talked about that a lot last week. So a year out, from the municipal election, which I think is going to be interesting because this will be the first municipal election with political parties involved.
Yeah.
and I don't think it's possible to dig too deep into what the implications of that might be, but she's setting a bold, kind of a populist course, and for a lot of her supporters, I think that she proved this weekend that she's the fighter that they want in the ring.
100%.
What do you make of it?
Well, I think Max Fawcett was right. She's been working backwards since she got elected towards this, and you can't deny that her strategy was perfect. And like we're saying, this isn't 91% of the public who are endorsing Danielle Smith. It's her party, right? But, undeniably, she gave them what they wanted with these, new bills and amendments that she put forward, some of them right before the AGM. But now, I'd really, as someone, who is part of the public, not part of the UCP party, I'd like to see the other things now. Okay. Your party loves you. It's let's just call it 100%. They endorse you, but the real things that are affecting Albertans aren't some of these things that are like outlier amendments and bills. Please, let's see some things on affordability, healthcare, all the things that Edmontonians, Calgarians, and Albertans are screaming for, right?
I agree with you, and that is the job of the premier. Mm-hmm. It's the job of any mayor, of any premier, of any prime minister, and the like, is to govern for the entire electorate. Mm-hmm. But her mission this weekend was to send a message to her party.
Of course.
And I think that she did that. You sort of look at those. I mean, I see some comments in the live chat. Great to see Real Talkers in the live chat today. Look at this Cactus Sheriff. We haven't seen that name for a while. Says, "What's up?" Everybody goes, "Cactus, where you been?" Cactus says, "Don't worry, I'm still catching the podcast every day." There you go. We appreciate that. But what about questions like this? I mean, we've got a Real Talker in here that says, well, does a result like this, does the result of this vote mean that, for example, Smurfy999 is wondering, does the leadership vote mean that David Parker is irrelevant now?
Maybe,
The founder of Take Back Alberta, the one that David Parker claimed to be the one that got rid of Jason Kenney. So Smurfy, definitely a relevant question. Erica Baruti's basically said, or I would say prognosticated the exact same thing on our most recent episode, that Real Talk Roundtable with her and Erica. Or if you missed Cheryl Oates and Erica Baruti's, I encourage you to check it out. I thought it was good. It got a little, I don't know if it got heated, but definitely it got a little tense in here.
Bro, I was sitting back here eating popcorn, just watching the sparks fly. It was
would say, it's not dated. Like, I think you can still watch it after the AGM and it'll still be entertaining. But back to Smurfy's question, like, what does that mean for David Parker? And not just David, but for people that are organizing, and you saw a lot of them on Twitter. You saw a lot of them that were implying or threatening to bring all these people to kind of turn the vote and to send the premier packing. And that's happened before. Like we were talking about on the show, I know it's not news to Real Talkers, like more conservative premiers meet their maker at party AGMs than in general elections, right? It's like the party gets sick of you, or the party doesn't believe that you're the one anymore to lead the party, as opposed to the general electorate. And so, what this means for the right flank, or the rightist flank of the UCP, probably those that are grumbling about, Smith not delivering on what she's promised to them thus far, those that are still unhappy about COVID-19 mandates. You and I often joke about how we still see the billboards on the side of the semi-trailers on the QE2, people that are still upset about that kind of stuff, those that wanted more drastic pushback on Ottawa. Smith's approval rating here, 91.5, I'm going to call it 92%, sends a pretty clear message. She's secure. She's not butting for anybody. And I think it narrows the lane of the rightist wing even further. They can continue to make noise, but this is, like you said, Johnny, near unanimous support, and it makes it clear who's in charge.
Of course.
Like 91.5 is a number where that's like, if for those sports fans, that's when you just go, scoreboard. Anything anybody says, scoreboard. 91.5% is going to make any premier feel secure no matter what. What do the implications mean? I think probably it may be a quieter caucus, at least in the short term. Her control tightens. I think that critics will probably try to push back, but they'll probably be risking their own relevance, right? Which is something significant in politics. Probably doesn't mean that everything's settled within the party, right? Still division over issues like healthcare reform, depending on where the MLAs or where the ministers are from or who they're representing. The energy transition, rural, urban priorities, none of these were solved over the weekend. But Smith's got the votes for now. And if cracks emerge on those fronts, I guess there could be a reckoning down the road, and probably will be. It's politics, but this is more than a vote of confidence. This is a green light for the agenda.
Oh, yeah.
right? And to keep pushing it. And so you better believe that her party will continue to see what sort of a message this sends to Ottawa. They will be controlling this narrative and what it means for the Alberta NDP as well, using the momentum to keep her base organized. On Twitter just the other day, I mean, over the weekend, you saw it from the Premier herself, who's obviously got to be thrilled with the outcome here. I would venture to say, and I've not talked to any members of her team and asked what they forecasted, what sort of vote they were looking at. I don't think any of them would go on the record anyway to a talk.
Let me ask you, what did you think?
They're not going to tell a talk show host. What I'm trying to remember is whether or not you or I said it on the show or whether we said it out of the mic. I did say on the show that I expected basically strong support, that I expected she wasn't going to have any problems. I remember having a conversation here. I'm pretty sure the mics were not on with some people that were in the room, and we were talking about, mid 80s.
I thought 75, 80. So 90 is
like 92.
That's
So I think that's pretty significant. But this from the Premier says Alberta's United Conservative Party members showed up in droves this weekend to prove we're stronger than ever. Our UCP government, or our United Conservative government, is back in the ledge this week with a renewed mandate. There it is again, right, to fight for Albertans. She says they'll focus on creating jobs, improving the healthcare system, maintaining public safety, and reducing the costs of taxes, insurance, and utilities. I mean, of note, they've not yet introduced that tax cut that they promised, and so that's something that she'll have to answer on. And the insurance front is something, by the way, I won't go into the weeds on that right now. That's something we're keeping an eye on. Insurance reform is something that a lot of people are demanding in the province of Alberta. I saw that economist Jack Mintz, who's been friendly with Conservative premiers in past, to say the very least, is out with a new paper on what he thinks needs to happen with insurance in the province. But here's Smith again saying on the 2nd of November, wanting to express heartfelt gratitude for incredible support. She says will ensure that Alberta remains a province that upholds the values that have established us as a beacon of hope, freedom, and prosperity. She says we're on the right path. She says Alberta is safer, stronger, and freer today, thanks to the hard work that you and the United Conservative government is doing. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that not everybody believes that Alberta is safer, right? We talked a lot about this legislation around, trans students in particular, trans youth, et cetera. And that's a story that's not going to go away for this Premier. You look at some of the talk around the country. I hosted 2 different events this weekend on Saturday and Sunday that both drew people from outside the province. And the one thing that they're talking about, because they obviously read headlines, is that Alberta has introduced the most restrictive or the furthest sweeping legislation
in the country
involving the LGBTQ2S plus community, as somebody said in our live chat on Friday, in North America. So I don't think that everybody would agree with the Premier that Alberta is safer today, but in the context of what she's talking about and who she's talking to, that's her message.
And I don't know if I feel any freer. I mean, I'm sure some of these things are, they make a few people happy. They make a small amount of people happier. But I don't know if I woke up today feeling any freer in Alberta. But again, I just hope, and I know someone said this in the chat. She addressed, affordability, healthcare in her 2-minute kind of speech at the end. But let's see the work. Talk is cheap. Speeches are great. Standing ovations are awesome, but affordability and healthcare are at the top of the list for all Albertans, and they haven't really been addressed at all. So.
Something that's interesting here, and obviously pundits are writing about this, and this is something that, I think, I would pay $1 million if I had it. Actually, even if I had it, I wouldn't pay $1 million. That's wild. I think I'd probably hang. You get my point. I would be very curious to be in the Alberta NDP war room right now. Technically, they'll reserve that phrase for when there's an election, but you know what I'm talking about. The halls of power, the inner circle, Nenshi's senior strategist. What are they making of this? Because I think you can approach this from a number of different angles. Just off the top of my head, it's a big number. And it's kind of, I guess, in a way, probably a bit of a loss for Alberta's official opposition, because they would love to see dissension in the ranks. Like, they don't care, critics of Danielle Smith, political opponents of Danielle Smith, don't care who takes her down. They would just love to see her taken down. They love to see her support watered down. They'd love to see that, and clearly that's not the case.
No.
But at the same time, I think that if you're an opponent of this government, whether you're official opposition or a citizen, this is also a rallying cry. This is also an opportunity to say, hey, look, we better get our beans in a row. This is something we better take seriously. Danielle Smith clearly is the horse that they're hitching their wagon to. Naheed Nenshi is ours. And ultimately, what's the best way to get at her? What's the best way to oppose this government and send a strong message to Albertans? And so keep an eye out for, you will see it. I mean, you're already seeing it, but you'll see more of it. The official opposition that'll remind you from their perspective exactly what the implications are of a premier now that has support like this and essentially a green light to move forward with what it is that she's said that she's going to do. Danielle Smith is going to take this as an endorsement from the province of Alberta, and people are going to write in, and I can see that people right now are already in our live chat that are saying, hey, listen, this is just the people that were there, just the people that could afford to attend in person, this, that, and the other.
Yeah, it's not the whole party.
It's not, and it's definitely not all of Albertans.
All the supporters,
But let me respectfully say that if Smith had received I'm thinking back to, Ralph Klein at the end of days, or I'm talking at the end of his political career, or Ed Stelmach for that matter, or whatever else, when the numbers are like 62.5 or 69 or low 70s, then these same folks would not be saying, yeah, but to be fair, it was only the people in the room, right? You wouldn't be saying that. You'd be saying, oh my gosh, look at this. She's done. Stick a fork in her. She's done. So I get that there are some people, and we've received emails, and we see you and leaving comments on our posts saying this has like a real Putin vibe to it. This has a real North Korea vibe to it. 92% isn't even a believable number. Talk to people that were there. I mean, I'm talking to people that were there. I saw some of them on Sunday that were already back, that were attending the event I was at. By the way, shout out to Andrea Hines. You remember her? She's been on the show before, the sex trade abolitionist, the former brothel owner. Really remarkable story Andrea has. They've got a new book out, When Men Buy Sex, Who Really Pays? And here, we can give them a shout out and show their website, Johnny. But the official book launch in Edmonton yesterday with a live stream, people were joining from all across the country and even further. A big shout out to them. But I want to give them credit. They had in the room Alberta's Lieutenant Governor. Lehani was there. You had the Minister for Arts and Culture and the Status of Women, Tanya Furr, was there. A lot of political staffers were there because this is something that matters to a lot of people. The point is, had a chance to talk to people that had attended that AGM and people that were there, and all they were really talking about, kind of that general theme, was how much energy there was in that room. And so this party takes a lot of momentum from this, I think. Karen says, though, only UCP members that attended could vote. So it was like 91% of those that could afford to be there. With Nenshi, all members could vote. Okay. I mean, I don't even know, to be honest with you. Part of my brain is telling me to kind of hang back or hang tight on comparing the two numbers. 91.5% for Smith, 86% for Nenshi in the leadership vote. Because number one, they're completely different contexts, right? I mean, I get that we want to compare them because it's an interesting talking point, and they're both very strong numbers. But this is a party AGM where people are voting on a leader's performance. The other is a leadership race with other candidates involved, right? There's obviously vote splitting at play. There's all different things, but really it kind of feels like apples and oranges. Let me just say this. Vamp Fashion sounds like they were there, says Premier Smith's speech was inspiring, very positive, very forward-looking. I will say this. Both parties now have leaders where I believe there's no question about whether or not the party members want them there.
Yeah, that's
Is that
sure.
fair to say?
That's
neither of Alberta's two main political parties are in a scenario or a situation right now, like the Democrats had with Joe Biden, 4 months ago, where they were going, oh my gosh, we're in trouble right now. This can't be the way that it goes. This can't be our leader. This can't be the person to take us into election. That is not the case in Alberta right now. Alberta's NDP members spoke very strongly in their leadership vote that they wanted Nenshi there, and Alberta's United Conservative members have spoken very strongly that Smith is the leader that they want there, and that they like sort of what she's. I mean, keep in mind, she's not been leader forever, right? She won the election in May. It's just past the 2-year mark of her leadership. So maybe a little bit interesting. I think some people thought it was a little soon to have a leadership review. What was it, 5 months after the election, But, what have you. It's an endorsement. I mean, that's what it is. And so you've got two party leaders here that I think are very strong. Alberta Girl says even the fact that UCP changed the voting rules on this is slimy. Kenny was dethroned by mail-in ballot that every member could vote, which is drastically different than what happened on Saturday. I noticed, I've seen a lot of people also suggest that like some memberships were revoked. In other words, some people were prevented from attending in Red Deer on Saturday. So, I don't know. I mean, listen, all that really matters here, I mean, at the end of the day, Smith's in, Smith's here. Nenshi's here. And now for Albertans, like for when you're looking at this, at the end of the day, what does politics mean to you? How does it affect your family? How does it affect your business? How does it affect your everyday life? Mm-hmm. That's how most people think about politics. Mm-hmm. I think some people love politics like team sports, where it feels like your team won or lost on the Sunday, your team won or lost in the playoff round. Like, I get that. But at the end of the day, politics is how does it affect you on a day-to-day basis? And so, at the end of the day, I think that's how most people are going to be reviewing these numbers. Randy says it's not hard receiving 91% when you orchestrated the review to be in your favor. Travis kind of like beating the pathetical drum, which is like, he calls her Marlena instead of Danielle. He thinks he's clever. It's like it's the left-wing equivalent of calling Justine. He says Jespo's just doing Marlena's laundry for this number. Here's the thing, Travis, is like, we bring on people that are very critical of the premier, and I speak very critically of the premier. As a matter of fact, I think it's kind of pathetic, the people that continue to go on and on and on, how they think that I'm carrying water for Danielle Smith. I'm calling it how it is, dude. 91.5% at a leadership review at an AGM is a big deal. And I think that it's a little bit embarrassing, people comparing a Democratic gathering in Alberta to North Korea and Russia. I get it. I get if you don't like Danielle Smith. I get if she's not your cup of tea. This show has pulled no punches on the forecasted and very real, immediate impact of some of these policies, including the ones at school. So the show has been a platform where many views are welcome and you can make up your own mind. But like 91.5% doesn't lie.
No,
like the number doesn't lie. Like Johnny said, it might as well be 100. Yeah. You can always send us an email. The DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park every Friday. Give us a chance to basically put hot takes in front of you. Well, they're all real emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com. It's the flamethrower presented by those DQs. And of course, you can send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com at any point. Collin May is going to join us in just a little bit. He says that we're off. He says that we're missing the mark on our criticism of this Jordan Peterson law. And so we're going to find out why from the former chair of the Alberta Human Rights Commission. That coming up in just a second. Today is a big day for Real Talk as we are proud to announce a partnership with UCAN Youth Services. And I want to direct you to their website at ucan.ca. This is an amazing team that is in the business of helping vulnerable teens stay on their feet or get on their feet to a path of economic independence. At ucan.ca, you can learn more about the work that they're doing. They are ready, willing, and able with a Road to Work program. These are different pre-employment programs for young people aged 18 to 25, allowing them to glean and develop the skills to enter the workforce. This is at-risk youth that are tapping into this incredible organization. You may remember Kyle Dubé. He was on the show. Kyle passed away, unfortunately, suddenly and unexpectedly over the last year. A huge loss. But UCAN is pressing forward with his vision in mind. And they've got a relentless approach for young people, and they're really doing amazing work. These youth are no longer lost. You're going to hear a lot about UCAN here on the show. Today is day number 1, and we couldn't be more excited to be helping them continue to reach their vision. You can at ucan.ca. We're putting out the call to alum from the University of Alberta. You have your alumni awards coming up, and I wanted to put this website on your radar. This is ualberta.ca, or rather uab.ca/alumni awards. We're calling for nominations. The impact of U of A's alumni is felt around the world. They're leaders, they're innovators, they're change makers, and their passion continues to create impact. Do you know an outstanding alum from the U of A? Have you been inspired by one of them? We're looking for change makers, world shapers, and status quo breakers, those who have redefined excellence and deserve recognition. There's 5 different award categories. You can check them all out online. Make those nominations today at uab.ca/alumni. alberta.ca/nominate. We'll put that web address in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube so you can recognize a U of A alum. You ever been recognized as an alumni from any post-secondary thing?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, no, me neither. Not that it's a sore spot. Not that it's a sore spot, but it's a great opportunity.
I will say the good thing about this AGM is it impassions both sides, right? And like you were saying, you've got now the gloves are on. It's Nenshi versus Smith. There's no more questions about which party wants which leader to be their leader. Let's get going here. Let's talk about the real issues and let's get them going head to head.
Sure. I mean, Sylvia in the chat says the principle here is that 91% of 6,000 people determined our premier for the rest of us.
Sure.
You know, whether or not it was Danielle. But no, like respectfully, Sylvia, that's not true. Like in May, Albertans determined who the premier is, right? In May,
exactly.
Everybody that's 18 years of age or older, had a chance to vote, and the election determined who our premier is. And then this is a party exercising its right on its rules. I'm not a member of the party, guys. This is just straight up. Like, the party has its rules for its AGM, and the party decided to keep its leader installed. That's what happened. Albertans decided who the premier was in May, and it was a close race. And I think that the NDP probably can taste it. So close they can taste it.
Oh, yeah.
But if the NDP would have won, Rachel Notley would still be here. She's gone now. Well, she's in the House, but she's not the leader anymore. Naheed Nenshi's the leader, and we'll see what happens. I'm curious to know what our next guest thinks of this. We're not bringing him on to talk about the leadership race or the AGM, but I bet he'll have an opinion on it. Collin May is a lawyer in Calgary and an adjunct lecturer in community health sciences at the University of Calgary, specializing in harm caused by unfair or inappropriate complaints processes related to professional regulation. He served on the Provincial Council of the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta. He was a commissioner and, for a time, chief of the Alberta Human Rights Commission before he was fired by former Minister Tyler Shandro. Collins published numerous articles on the psychology, social theory, and philosophy of cancel culture, and he's preparing a course on the history and regulation of professions. He's making his Real Talk debut today, Collin. It's nice to see you, man. Thanks for making time for us. Were you at the AGM, the UCP AGM this weekend?
No, I'm not a member of the UCP. No.
Were you keeping an eye on it? Is that something that was of interest to you?
It was a bit of an interest to me, but maybe for other reasons involving some litigation, but otherwise, no, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to it. No.
Okay, let me ask you this, because people are going to want to know, and you and I are going to talk about the Jordan Peterson Law and a whole bunch of stuff, but your name has been in the news most prominently as the former chief of the Alberta Human Rights Commission, fired by then Minister Tyler Shandro. People are going to want to know what's the status of that. My understanding is that this is being litigated right now, which will probably limit what you can talk to us about or what you can tell us.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, I filed a wrongful dismissal suit against the government in October 2022, just a few days actually before Danielle Smith won the leadership back then. And we're going through the litigation process. We have mediation coming up. So that's about all I can say there. It's not an enjoyable thing to litigate, even as a lawyer who knows the process. So hopefully we'll get something solved soon.
You've written a lot about cancel culture, and you've written in the Hub, you've written in Postmedia papers. I've seen it, and you've described yourself as the target of a cancellation attack back in 2022 when then opposition critic Irfan Sabir accused you of Islamophobia for some writings that you had done in 2013. I've never had a chance to talk to you about this before, and I'm curious to know your explanation of that circumstance and basically what you would argue. I mean, let me not put it like what you would argue to the court, but essentially what's the truth from your perspective on how that all went down, and what is your truth?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of elements to it, of course, because there were various players involved who came after me. Essentially what had happened, I had written a book review in 2009. It was on a book by Professor Ephraim Karsh, who's a specialist in contemporary Middle Eastern history. It was called Islamic Imperialism, published by Yale University Press. So a very reputable publishing house, and I wrote a book review on it. I disagreed with him. I agreed with him on certain things. I had some background in this area. I had studied medieval Islamic philosophy when I was at Harvard, and when I was in Paris studying there, I studied under Pierre Manon, who does a lot of work on the political form. So I wrote a book review, and it was one of many I'd written. I didn't think anything of it. I'd forgotten about it. But, and of course, some of this is still being worked out that will come out probably in litigation. But my partner, he had worked for Rachel Notley for 4 years while she was premier in 2 different roles. And it appears that they had somehow gotten a hold of this book review, that they were working with some bloggers to discredit me. And there's a lot of other things that were going on behind the scenes with the Human Rights Commission. There certainly were some allegations of sexual harassment of employees there. And I don't want to get into that too much because that is pretty sensitive stuff. There were some lawsuits. And it seemed that the NDP didn't want me in this role. But, you know, being called racist and Islamophobic by Irfan Sabir, well, I personally knew him. I mean, I attended his birthday dinner in 2018 in December. So there was a lot of a sense of personal betrayal going on. I think there was a lot of interference with ideas of academic freedom. You know, Rajan Sawhney, who's currently the advanced education minister, she decided to come out against me, which concerns me that somebody who should be supporting academic freedom actually, and as minister, took that approach. But and ultimately there was an effort to have me removed. The National Council of Canadian Muslims went to the minister and decided they didn't want me involved in this role. I had been accused of not meeting with them, which is not true. I had. And eventually Tyler Shandro dismissed me from the role. And of course, he wanted me to just step aside, and I didn't. I got legal counsel because I thought there's principles that I want to stand up for here. So still fighting for those. And what it did result in, though, is I have done a lot more writing now on cancel culture. A lot of it's published in the US, but some here in Canada as well. And as I said, I've looked at the psychology, the motivations, the social theory behind it, and the philosophy. So still working our way through the litigation. We'll see where it goes.
Collin, you've I mean, a large part of your professional career has been dealing with complaints-based tribunal systems, and so I want to first of all let the audience know I appreciate you reaching out to us. You're a real talker, which I was not aware of before. I always love knowing when people subscribe to the podcast and tune in from time to time. But you reached out basically to say that you don't think that me or some of the other critics who have commented on Danielle Smith's proposed so-called Jordan Peterson Law are actually doing it justice. You say we're kind of missing the mark on criticizing this law that endeavors to protect free speech for professionals who may have controversial opinions that are made public. Let's get into this. Number one, your take on it. And number two, where am I way off?
Well, I think the problem is we're focusing too much on this Jordan Peterson phenomenon. He's obviously a celebrity. And as you said, he can use this now to bolster his position.
Oh, yeah.
Which, that's not surprising he would. And you see that in cancel culture too. It's very difficult to cancel somebody of his stature. You see that with J.K. Rowling because they have too much of celebrity and they're powerful enough and wealthy enough to move ahead and not be taken out. But at the same time, I look at this and I think, well, if he's brought this issue to the forefront, I mean, I guess I'm happy to have him do it. I've been working in this area of reform of professional regulation since 2017. And, the reason I got into it is because what happened to Jordan Peterson is, like I say, that's the big splashy stuff. But when you watch the video that Danielle Smith and Mickey Amory put out, they mentioned Carolyn Brostrom. And to me, that's where you have to go. Because Carolyn was she is an RN in Saskatchewan. Her grandfather died in a care facility. And she went on Facebook and talked about his care. And she complained about some of it. She said some of it was good, some of it was bad. She didn't mention any names, but she was then reprimanded by her regulator, the Registered Nurses Association in Saskatchewan. And, all she had done was publicly advocated for better palliative care as an RN. And she went through the process. She was fined $26,000. Well, she was actually fined $1,000, but had to pay the hearing costs, which was another 25. And she had to do 2 reflective essays, I think it was. And, she was actually working to improve the system for the public. And this is where I think what people are getting wrong about this is, in Canada, we use the self-governance model for professional regulation. Now, a lot of countries have gotten rid of it because they don't think it protects the public. It's too focused on protecting the profession. And of course, and that is one of the mandates of professional regulators in Canada, is not just to protect the public, but it's a dual mandate to also support the integrity of the profession. But that means that those two things can conflict. And of course, in Carolyn's case, the courts found ultimately she went 3 levels up. She had to go through the appeal process with her regulator, then to the Court of Queen's Bench, then to the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal said, this was wrong, what was done to her. She should have had the right to speak publicly. And in fact, she was contributing to public discussion and to the protection of the public, which of course, under Section 2B of the Charter of Rights, one of the things that the courts have routinely said, the importance of free expression is that it is a truth-seeking mechanism. You want people to speak publicly. But Carolyn was silenced. And of course, my family had a similar experience when my father passed away in 2017 in care. My sister, a palliative RN, she was seeing that there were a lot of problems with his care. And she was advocating for him. And eventually, one of the people who was making mistakes, one of the healthcare providers who was misdiagnosing morphine, accused my sister of having done it. Well, she hadn't done anything, she hadn't touched anything. But another RN then called the police on us to have us removed from our father's deathbed. And the police didn't do it. They were not going to help in this. But to continue the harm, an RN who was involved in this effort went to my sister's regulator and made complaints about her behavior. And she was investigated. And as soon as we found out about it, my sister just fell apart because, on top of the poor care that my father had received, we knew that more needed to be done to improve the palliation. Plus now she was under investigation. And I went to her regulator. I said, look, this is not right. You shouldn't be doing this. And they continued. And it went 8 months. And my sister, was off work for 16 months. It was hugely stressful for her. She had to go on medication. It was a nightmare for our entire family that we went through. And these are the instances that we have to look at. The Jordan Peterson case is flash in many ways, but it also highlights some of our problems, what people have experienced. And there are other cases. And, it's not as though the regulators, though, are all evil in this. I mean, in the case of my sister's regulator, the CEO, Joy Peacock, she met with our family. She got involved. I got involved with them. They made significant efforts to improve. So the regulators themselves recognize that they have to be careful, that they have to give people the freedom to speak, because it's not just the fringe, as Irfan Sabir called it, who want to say vile things. It's people who are advocating for the care of their loved ones. It's people who are talking about how to improve the system. And what surprised me about Irfan coming out and saying some really despicable things, I think, To say that this is about people just wanting to say vile things, I really took offense at that. Now, of course, earphones called me things in the past, so I'm used to it now, I guess. But it just struck me as odd anyhow, because Carolyn Broth-Strom was an NDP candidate in the last election. And the government of British Columbia, the NDP government, has been one of the leaders in Canada on trying to reform professional regulation. The stuff that's coming up with Jordan Peterson is not new, even here in Alberta. Tyler Shandro, who, he was the guy who fired me, so I have no dedication to him, but to his credit, he made some efforts here in Alberta to make changes. There was a report done through the Health Quality Council of Alberta. And even in our case, after we cleared up the investigation into my sister, investigations were done into what actually happened to my father. And we ended up with 9 healthcare providers being reprimanded to some degree by 3 regulators. Protection for Persons in Care reprimanded the facility. We went through Alberta Health Services process. Then we had to go to the Alberta Ombudsman. And that only came to an end. My journey through dealing with professional regulation, just in our personal context, came to an end in May 2024, almost 7 years after my father's death, when the Alberta Ombudsman's Office produced its final report on AHS's actions. So it is a horrible thing to go through. And, will I agree with everything that Danielle Smith is proposing? Maybe not. But at least it's being dealt with. At least it's coming forward and trying to, I would say change the name. Don't call it Jordan Peterson's Law. Call it Carolyn Strom's Law. Or call it my sister. Call it after my sister if you want. But I think that those issues are the ones that come front and center for me.
Like, respectfully to your sister, Carolyn Strom, not as many people would be talking about it if it wasn't named the Jordan Peterson Law, which was like my very first observation about it. Smith, Premier Smith knows exactly what she's doing by doing that. I'm sorry for the loss of your dad, and I appreciate you sharing that personal story. I would imagine that an investigation like that would be very stressful for someone like your sister. There will be a lot of people going, though, hang on, though. For these professional, these accrediting bodies, these colleges, to maintain credibility, to maintain the integrity of their profession, they need to reserve the right. They need to pursue investigations like this. They need to take complaints seriously. And, holding engineers or healthcare practitioners or psychologists or what have you to a high standard should be the mandate. And the wheelhouse of these governing bodies, not of politicians. And this Jordan Peterson Law kind of politicizes the whole process. Why should politicians or a provincial government essentially be overriding colleges or accrediting bodies? What would you say to those folks?
Well, a couple of things. You've got to remember, like I said, there is a dual mandate here, and the mandates can conflict. Most people think that the mandate is to protect the public, which is sort of the most important mandate, certainly. But the other one, as I said, is to protect the integrity of the profession. But protecting the integrity of the profession, which is more important? In Canada, we've gotten used to this notion that these bodies are self-governing. As I said, the UK has gotten rid of that. Self-governance was eliminated precisely because these regulators were not protecting the public. They were doing more to protect their own profession. And, when you look at the parties involved, there's actually 3 parties. Jim Casey, who's from the expert on professional regulation law, talks about this, and it was mentioned in Carolyn's case by the Court of Appeal, is that there's actually 3 parties that are involved here. There is the public, there's the profession, and then there is the regulated individual. And the courts argued that her rights were interfered with by this effort to protect the profession, but so was the public's right. So that individual member who's speaking out on behalf of the public can actually be harmed because these regulators are protecting the profession. Now, should the government be involved? Is it politicized? Well, the government has to be involved in a certain respect, because for these bodies to have the authority to discipline their members, the government has to set up the statute. They have to enact the statute to allow that to happen.
Sure.
Otherwise, all you have are associations. So the government has to be involved, and it is involved. As I said, there is much more public oversight in the UK and in Australia. And what it has interested me about this is not just the legal aspect, but looking at what sort of harm does come about. What happens to people when they go through this process and they are silenced, and they are put through a long and difficult situation. And I think, it's we see the regulators, as I've said. I work still. I communicate with the CEO of the College of Physicians, with the College of Registered Nurses. They send me information on what they're doing to improve their processes. So they want this to happen as well. They need the guardrails. And the question then is really going to become, what sort of things can you put in place through legislation that will help prevent these things from happening down the road? And again, I refer to Jim Casey. He's mentioned in an Edmonton Journal piece that it's better to have the regulators themselves do it. He's encouraged them to continue to look at their own processes. And I agree with that, but I think we also want to see and take some of what we've seen from these court cases, because there are some very good decisions. The courts have come up with some good outlines, and to take those and see if there is some legislative things we can do. As I said, Tyler Shandro changed the health regulators so that instead of having a majority of the members of their council being members of the profession, you now have half and half. So half of them are appointed by the government, and half are the members of the profession. The other thing is medical regulators are all subject to review by the Office of the Alberta Ombudsman, and they review fairness. They don't overturn decisions, and they can't force the regulators to do something. But again, the ombudsman's part of the legislative branch. It's not an executive organization. So it's another way of having some oversight, some looking into these things and seeing if they're actually behaving the way they should. So sure, politicize. Well, I mean, anything the government does gets politicized.
Of course.
But behind the scenes, there has been a lot of work. This has been ongoing. As I said, the Health Quality Council of Alberta has been involved. I was involved in a review that the College and Association of Registered Nurses of Alberta did. They brought in Harry Caton, who's an expert on professional regulation from the UK. I was the only public witness that he interviewed for that. And his recommendations have been used. And sure, I'm not going to defend Danielle Smith and whether she politicizes something or whether Earfund politicized this. But what I would say is, Jordan Peterson has brought this to your attention. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Jordan Peterson, as you say.
Yeah.
But I've been working at this for 7 years. So thanks, Jordan, for bringing it up. And maybe thank you, Danielle, for putting it out there. And of course, there is, they have asked for input from the colleges. Scott McLeod from the College of Physicians has said he's definitely going to give some. Joy Peacock, I'm sure, from the College of Registered Nurses will.
Of course they'll participate. Of course they'll participate. I said, I guess it was last week, that I thought that this could have a really chilling effect on regulators, and that was something that you referenced in your note to me, that you're not sold. You don't think so?
No. You've also got to remember that these are also part of the administrative law regime. There, which includes all everything from the Alberta Energy Regulator to parole boards. They're all subject to administrative law. And one of the principles in administrative law, too, is that, though this has changed recently with a new decision, but one of the principles is that the courts defer to these bodies. There's a great deal of deference to these bodies. They have a lot of control over what they do. And also, you've got to remember they do sort of two things. One is set standards, which almost no government ever interferes with. Now, there has been some issues about the path course that the Law Society has put forward. And Danielle Smith has mentioned that. I mean, I did the path course. I had to do it. It was mandatory. I didn't mind it. I didn't get upset. It was fine. I think with with these things going forward, there's not going to be a lot of chilling effect. And if there isn't a chilling effect, if the regulators step back because of what happened to my family, what happened to Carolyn, what happened to Joseph Groya, a lawyer in Toronto who had to take his case all the way to the Supreme Court, if they step back and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe we need to change things, maybe we shouldn't be investigating in this circumstance, then I think that's a good thing because it also saves resources. I mean, and again, I'll talk about Tyler Shandro a bit, and I have to be careful because it means the Law Society will come after me for questioning their decisions. But, I watched his hearing. And, you mentioned that I was a commissioner at the Human Rights Commission and the chief for a while. And a lot of what we did was review dismissals of cases to see if they should move to hearings. And we had to look at the evidence and weigh it and see, well, is there a possibility that this could go somewhere? And, when I saw the evidence that was presented at Tyler's hearing, I was kind of surprised because I thought there's no way this evidence should have produced a hearing. An investigation should have ended it, as far as I could tell. Now, I didn't, that's just my opinion. I'm not saying the Law Society's, a horrible creature or anything. But, and then when I read the decision that came out, and I know one of the lawyers who was on the panel, very good lawyer, I thought it was a good decision. It was well reasoned. But they did look at some of these things. They mentioned the Strom case. They mentioned these factors. And they mentioned the evidence, which was not very good. I didn't see that there's a strong argument for Tyler to even be before a hearing panel. So, if there's a chilling effect, well, let's think of it not so much as a chilling effect, but maybe just taking a moment and thinking, should we do this or should we proceed with this? And maybe not. If you're going after somebody whose family member has just died in a bad circumstance, and they're the ones now being investigated rather than the people who caused this, or you've got people feeling offended, which of course is what happened in Carolyn's case. Some of the staff at this facility that she complained about were offended. Well, you weren't hurt, you weren't harmed. That's offense is not harmful. So, buck up. And I know that when Carolyn's case went forward, when other regulators, nursing regulators, heard about what the Saskatchewan regulator was doing, there were some raised eyebrows because they thought, what the heck are you doing? This is not something you should be getting into. Yeah. And so, if there's some guidelines there that we can put in place that prevent this harm from happening to people, as I say, we're not all out there trying to say vile things. But I'm not saying, that these regulators shouldn't be able to deal with some public speech because
they have to.
Oh, absolutely.
If a professional engineer that's a high profile, whatever, or a psychologist that's providing care to people goes on the record and says that the Holocaust didn't happen, well, I don't even need to use a hypothetical. Jim Keegster, let's go back to Eckville, Alberta, right? Like a teacher using the classroom to instruct students that the Holocaust never happened. Like that teacher's got to be out of there right now. We can't right? I mean, that's an extreme example, but
but I think it'll depend a lot on the profession. Because, for instance, doctors have specializations, right? And lawyers specialize, but we can sort of specialize and move around and try to pick up different areas of law because they're all sort of generally areas of law and you can learn new areas. Doctors, of course, are very specialized, and once you get into a specialization, you don't want another specialist. Like I've said before, you don't want a dermatologist making public statements about cardiology. They don't have the skills, and they've gone beyond what they're actually professionally allowed to talk about. So that's an instance where you'd want to have something done. Now, again, with some of these issues, and I can think of one, and I won't go into it, but I can think of, it's the opioid issue. There was a standard put forward for doctors. It didn't actually work. It had to be reversed in some ways. And sometimes the expertise you get from people who are in these fields saying, this is a problem, we need to rethink this, and I disagree with the standard, and here's why. Now, I think those types of discussions are ones you want to hear. And regulators shouldn't be afraid of that. They shouldn't be afraid to themselves be challenged. they're just a group of people under a statute. But they have a lot of power. They do have a lot of power. So I think we need to have those discussions. Now, certainly, and the case law also is clear. When you go after somebody as a regulator, when you're going to discipline them, investigate, there's got to be a nexus between what they've said and the profession. And the case law is also clear that you can't just allege there's a general harm to the profession. You got to show there's some harm. The Carolyn's case was clear about that. So we got to keep inside those boundaries. And if there is a way to legislate some of that, and that's where I think it's going to require a lot of discussion. You're going to have the regulators giving their views and saying this will work, this we don't think will. And I think more of the focus has to be on protecting the public rather than the profession.
And there's
protection of the profession is a very old idea that goes back to the Middle Ages. The idea of public health is a much more recent idea. So I would put more emphasis on protecting the public, which includes those important discussions from people who are in the professions, rather than saying, "Oh, we need to protect the profession," because there's this line that comes out. Oh, you brought the profession into disrepute. Well, I can tell you, as a gay man, who do you think they would have targeted with that type of an idea back in the 1950s? Well, they would have used that. Oh, you're bringing the profession into disrepute because of how you behave sexually. So it's a slippery idea. I don't like it that much. Of course, that's not the case now. That's not something that wouldn't be an example of work now. But I do absolutely think that we need to have certain public statements do need to be reviewable. And I think you'll look at like I said, the regulators also are very careful about this. I know the College of Physicians does a lot of work. They're not going to reprimand you right off the hop. If you're saying something publicly that they're saying, well, look, there's no science to back this up. They'll talk to you. They'll go to the doctors. They'll bend over backwards to try to deal with what's happening rather than go to a disciplinary process.
Well, because it's a tough look for a college too, right? Like, you have to think of like with this membership and obviously with, people that have dedicated their entire lives to it, to achieving that professional designation, to working in that field, to all of a sudden see folks being stripped or limited, their careers cut off, their ability to practice eliminated. Obviously, you want to talk about chilling effects. That'll send a chilling effect through the membership. This heavy-handed approach is one that I have to assume as a civilian, the hammer doesn't drop without due consideration. It sends a message to thousands, if not millions of people.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the regulators are trying to not do that. Most of them, some are better than others. I mean, some have more resources. As there's 29 or 30 health regulators in Alberta. That's a province of just 5 million people. That's a lot of regulators. We've got a lot of these bodies. Some of them have resources, some of them don't. Certainly lawyers, doctors, the nurses do. But you're right. It can send a very chilling effect. When my sister was, she was off work for 16 months, all the people she worked with said, "What's going on?" And the impression was, oh my God, we got to be careful. We can't advocate for family members because look what Karna will do to us. And I had that discussion with the CEO from the College of Registered Nurses, and she said, yeah, we can't have that. We can't be in a situation where our members fear us that much. So the chilling effect really, I think, goes more to the members. They're chilled more than the regulators are. So as I say, chilling the regulators a little bit isn't such a bad thing, I don't think. I think give them, let them, they need to understand that they are being watched. They aren't just these free-floating entities. And I think they've taken that on board, most of them, not all of them. There's things I would change, certainly in my own regulator. Like I said, I would submit the Law Society as well to review on a basis of fairness to the Alberta Ombudsman. It's not right now. There's no oversight of the Law Society apart from going to judicial review. So that's something I would certainly want to see the government bring in. But there certainly are steps that we can do that try to balance that out a bit more. So it's not Is the regulator being chilled? Are the members being chilled? And I think we can, ultimately the goal is to benefit the public. So that's why I say let's put that out front. And to have my sister, who's an RN, a palliative RN, advocating for my father. You want palliative RNs to advocate in healthcare. I mean, it's a desire. HS tells you we want family advocacy. We want family input. And then if you do it and you get, investigated, that's not a good look.
No.
And it wasn't a good look for Carolyn. And like with my sister, her investigation went 8 months, but she ended up with a sort of PTSD from it. Carolyn's went years, and she had to go all the way to the Court of Appeal, which is not cheap. And yet she fought it out, and good on her. And I still, I was in touch with her right after the election. So, and so I don't think this has to be a left-right type of thing. Like you say, and Jordan Peterson, though, he is who he is, and he made this happen.
Yeah, like obviously, if you name it the Jordan Peterson Law, obviously it kind of sets the tone. And I think for the premier, she achieves something, as an astute messenger. She her messaging is on point with this. But you're right. I mean, this could apply to something. I mean, I think if somebody, a member of a professional designation, a college, whatever they are, that makes a comment around, like Palestine, or that. I mean, you could take an issue that's. I mean, I hate to be so sort of like dumb this down to the point of saying, here's the left wing stuff, here's the right wing stuff, but I mean, this could apply to anybody about anything, right? Yeah. If you're just joining us, live streaming this audio on the Mixler app presented by California Closets, we're talking to lawyer and lecturer Collin May, former chief of the Alberta Human Rights Commission. Collin, I want to get into our live chat right now. You've lit a fire under folks in a good way. Acute Awareness says, we do have to talk about harm to the public. A profession is an elevated and privileged position. Ms. B says, in a world where basic professional accountability has been eroded, especially in government and politicians, it's a farce for government to act like they're better equipped to dictate this. Interesting point. Wise Kyle says, there are conservative nurses. I see that people are talking here. What if the UNA were to, or people were to have, nurses were to have their designations threatened by attending the UCP AGM this weekend? Interesting. Acute Awareness, what I'm curious about is the counter legislation protecting the public as soon as this new legislation comes into play. Gilles wonders, says, I'm most curious about how this applies to regulatory bodies that the government also leads. Michael says, I personally believe there should be professional regulators to protect the public and a separate professional association to protect practitioners. Tracy says these issues are very complicated, but I applaud Collin for working to make things better. So there you go, Collin, a little bit of praise aimed at you. There's a ton. James says there's a lot of lawyers, doctors, engineers that express themselves politically in this province, but when they say things that go against the profession, that's over the line. That's what you signed up for. And I see a lot of people here talking about Dr. William Makis. I hesitate to even bring up William's name because he's the most litigious person that I've ever seen in my entire life. But for people that aren't aware, Dr. Makis, obviously that name resonated with you, Collin, a former radiologist, I think, and a former oncologist, right, who has drawn controversy and has actually built some support across the country as well for his outspoken views on the COVID-19 vaccines in particular. He linked the vaccines to what he describes as turbo cancers or aggressive cancer cases that he believes emerged among vaccinated individuals, and it drew attention from alternative media for sure. But I think it's fair to say his views have not been substantiated in mainstream scientific research. So he became embroiled in controversy. He's actually dragged me into it for whatever reason. He figures that the Notley NDP government was paying me to slander him, and he's made that very clear. It's obviously not the case. But his cancer research program discontinued about 8 years ago, and since then he's been involved in multiple lawsuits against Alberta Health Services, the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons. He ultimately lost his medical license, and his criticism of Alberta's healthcare bodies did escalate at a recent UCP fundraiser where he made defamatory remarks against the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta, which were then condemned from opposition leaders and healthcare officials. Do you draw anything from the case of Dr. Makis? I assume by your expression there that you're somewhat familiar with it.
Just slightly. Actually, I know his name. I don't really know much about what he did.
But is this an example where you have a former oncologist talking about the COVID-19 vaccine and relating it to turbo cancers when there's no research around it, no credible research around it?
Yeah, this would be one because this is something, and you see this from some of the case law, is that if you make criticisms of, as I said, it'll differ depending on the type of profession. Lawyers don't have a lot of science, hard science behind what we do. So uh, our issues are different. But if you've got somebody coming out and talking about the science and there's absolutely no factual basis for what they're saying, and again, I'm not saying that about Dr. Mackis. I don't really know what he was talking about. Um, but if that scenario, then yeah, you're gonna the college has got to say something. If you're making criticisms of standards that aren't working, for instance, in your own practice, you're seeing there's a problem, and you speak out about that, and you've got some factual basis for that. You're contributing to a discussion that needs to happen and maybe produce some change. As I said, that happened with the opioid standards at the College of Physicians. So, yeah, I absolutely think we can't just have people saying whatever they want. And as I said, especially in medicine, because you can't have a dermatologist talking about, well, I'm an expert in cardiology when they're not. That's not a good thing. And the college has a right and a responsibility to step in. Um, and whatever Dr. Mack has said about the college, I've had some fairly good experiences with them. Some people less so. You know, they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't a lot of the time. If they don't go after somebody, then people will say, oh, they're just not, they're not, they're just protecting their own. And if they do, then the person there that's being investigated gets upset. But um, I think the colleges are for the most part trying to do the right thing, but if they have those standards in place that say, look, we shouldn't go down this road, then and we can't because we'll get in trouble. That's okay. But I think with Dr. Mackis, I just don't know enough about his situation to really say much about it. But
Yeah, no, fair
like I
enough.
say, I've really been impressed by what by the College of Registered Nurses, by the College of Physicians. They make some mistakes. I mentioned to you, I think in my email that I was involved with Corey Ashley, whose wife Lillian Vanass had passed away at the age of 40. She was an Indigenous woman. There was some issues around accusing her of drug seeking, and that didn't seem to be the case. And then she died in the facility a couple hours later. And the College of Physicians did a talking circle. I think one of the first ever Indigenous talking circles with Corey, and I was involved in it. I was there. Um, you know, a lot of them are trying, but some of them go off the rails, and that's why I think we need some of this.
Collin, I want to thank you for your time. I want to recognize Cactus Sheriff with the one-liner of the day, at least to this point, says that I've risked being sued by Ezra Levant for suggesting that somebody other than him is the most litigious person in the country. That's correct. It's a good thing we're insured. Johnny, Collin, let me ask you this before we go. This may be a hard swerve to a different subject, or maybe not, but I couldn't help but notice your op-ed that was published in the Financial Post just within the last week. The first rule of being canceled: never apologize. Take us into this. Take us into it.
Well, that's again with cancel culture. There's three parties involved. Often, what happens with the target of a cancellation is that they are pushed, and I was, to either make an apology right away or to make a statement. And this is a common thread you see through almost all cancellation events. And my response to that has become don't, because it can be used against you later. And I've compared it in some academic literature that I published in the US to the false confession in the criminal law context. It has very similar psychological elements to it. And it also has similar legal impacts. And there's been some writing about this. There was that fellow from Mumford and Sons who got pushed out of the band for something he had said. And he did this apology right away. And then he went back and he said, no, I wasn't wrong. I didn't. And what he did then was, I thought was smart, was he apologized to the people who were in his family, who were suffering because of what had happened. He was apologizing to them, not for the attack, but for how this was impacting them. And the idea of apologies, if you've really done something wrong, sure, apologize. But generally, they're almost entirely ineffective, and they'll just get you in more trouble than if you hadn't done it.
So this is more for what you're saying. This is more of a legal strategy or a career preservation strategy, as opposed to like how you manage your personal relationships.
Right. Yeah. It is, and but it also has a psychological element in that it's most people, and I was like this. You think that the people you're talking to are interested in getting to the truth. But often when you're being attacked as part of a cancellation event, they aren't. What they're mostly concerned about is virtue signaling to their own in-group. That's what they want to do. And so, which is another article I've written on that element, on the cancelers and their motivations. So apologizing doesn't do any good. You're not going to get anywhere. There's very few instances where it's actually saved anybody's skin, and it's usually made things worse. And it doesn't help you get to the truth. It doesn't help you sort out really what happened or whether there was any harm caused by what you've said or done. So, my approach to it is that's why I said, don't do that. Don't apologize. It's not going to get you very far unless you really have done something that you can pinpoint that there's some harm and that you need to, say, look, I shouldn't have said this or done that. I'm sorry. But, and you got to remember, cancellation events, not everything is a cancellation event. It usually is, there's sort of 6 criteria that a lot of people have written on it, have set out. One of them is that what you've said or done isn't particularly problematic. And hey, I can tell you, one thing I'll tell you is that I was told that by the government that what I had written wasn't problematic. And then yet I'm, in trouble somehow. So,
yeah, I mean, you got to sometimes. I mean, there can be a ton of motivations at play. I won't get too into it, but like sometimes, this happens in politics. This happens with agencies, boards, and commissions as well. It's like, listen, I'm sorry, but you got to go. We don't need the distraction. We don't need the headlines. Whether it's right or wrong, you're out of here, and that happens like every single day, as you know. Interesting comments here. Acute Awareness says, I have literally not sued someone that told me to sue them because they apologized. I didn't take legal action, and that would not be the case if someone has apologized. Says you get far with me, says Acute Awareness. Aaron says there's no such thing as cancelers. Acute says you can apologize without accepting culpability. And Horse Lake Ranch just says this dude is on point. So there you go, Collin. Hey, listen, man, you've got us thinking, which is great. I appreciate knowing that you're an audience member of this show. I appreciate your availability. I've been wanting to interview you for a while, to be honest. And so I appreciate the update. We covered a lot of ground today. Before I let you go, it looked like I stepped on your toes a minute there, like you were about to say something in closing. Was there one other thing you wanted to put in front of the audience?
Not really. I mean, the apology thing is, like I say, apologies when you've done something wrong. Yeah.
100%.
Apologize. And it will, that's part of a mediation process, because I've run mediations. The problem with the cancel culture element is the people you're apologizing to aren't interested in the apology. They will use it against you. And again, in a cancellation event is a very precise, actually, type of thing. Because usually you haven't done anything wrong, or what you've said is such a insignificant wrong that it doesn't really require an apology. So when I talk about cancel culture, there's a definition for it. As I said, there's 6 factors that are usually present in a cancellation. So apologies generally, yeah, good. Yeah, if you've done something, and it can disarm a situation, especially in a mediation process, just to apologize, because people want to be heard if they feel they've been injured. But in a cancellation event, which is a very specific type of event, apologies generally just don't contribute anything. They don't help with, but that's just my research on it has sort of looked that way. But I've got to say thanks, Ryan. Again, I've been really enjoyed being here. I hope there's a good discussion going forward on professional regulation. And these things are always politicized. I get that. They're governments. They're going to, Irfan Sabir is going to say things that I think were pretty off the mark. But of course, I've kind of lost some respect for Irfan over the years now, not surprisingly. But Danielle Smith, like I said, I'm not a UCP member. I'm not in her camp at all. So I just hope that this moves the discussion forward. And I would be very happy if somebody would change the name from Jordan Peterson's Law. You could name it after my sister. Her name's Rhonda. Name it Rhonda's Law. I don't care. But let's. I just hope it moves forward. And there's a benefit to the public, and we don't see what happened to my family and to Carolyn and to people like that happening anymore.
Collin May is a lawyer and lecturer out of Calgary, former chief of the Alberta Human Rights Commission. Thanks for making time for us, Collin.
Yep. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, you got it. Man, this live chat is humming today, and I appreciate that. I see a lot of you in here saying that there's no such thing as cancel culture. You say it's consequence culture. Fair enough, I guess. I mean, everyone has their own opinions. Erin says, P.S. I love this guest. She has that in all caps. But she says, if cancel culture was a real thing, why are we talking about Jordan Peterson? Ms. Katie says Mumford & Sons played at a Kamala event last week. Says I love them. Is that true? Did they play? I don't know. You've been keeping an eye on.
I'm not watching every single.
But it seems like you're watching a lot of them.
I'm trying to go back and forth, and I'm seeing. Oh man, it's getting so crazy as we get closer, Ryan. You've got dancing, you've got Trump deep throating the mic. It's just every time I switch back and forth, I'm like,
not just deep throating.
This is pure entertainment.
He rubbed it out after too. Yeah, I saw somebody say he did like 5 different sex acts to that microphone in 30 seconds. Tony says hockey bros are still bitter that Don Cherry was canceled from Hockey Night in Canada. They're such delicate flowers. Travis says the time of free reign to be an asshole is over, and crying about canceling is a toddler's reaction to being held to account. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I don't want to get too into it. I feel like I've been targeted over the course of my career by the left and the right. That's fine. I don't know if I'd call it cancellation attempts, but when they come for you, and they try to burn your house down and leave nothing left. I'll tell you that much. Peaches says, if you're offended, I ain't apologizing unless you're my child. Like, I think I'm glad. Let me just say this. I'm glad that Collin clarified the idea about never apologize. And then he kind of said, listen, like if you've offended somebody or if you're clearly in the wrong or if it's a personal matter, then obviously apologize. I feel the same way. But I do think that for some people, like when all of a sudden, I can think of, I'm not going to get into that example. It involves a sponsor of ours, but like there are people where all of a sudden you're like an average, ordinary person, and then something flares up. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in the public crosshairs and your name or your company is trending on Twitter and you're going, oh, wow. Like, what's the right thing to do here? Yeah. And then typically crisis communicators, right? Like professionals that you hire to help you in a situation like that, or you're going to draft a statement, and that statement, not in every case, but in some cases, will apologize. And in the apology, you got to even be careful about that. Like the worst apology is the non-apology, right? I'm sorry you were offended.
Or if you don't learn from it, my partner always says the same thing. She says, it's great that people say sorry. It's great that you say sorry. But like if you continue to do this, you know what I mean? If there's no change in your actions, then the apology is kind of moot there. So like, I understand that, but also like this, if we just go back to Peterson, if we're talking about the Peterson Law, before all the uproar, he was just asked to take an HR course. Ryan, we've been in media before. We've taken DEI courses, maybe not the recent ones, but we've taken courses about diversity, about inclusion, about equality, about not necessarily not offending people, but including everyone in the conversation without. And here's the other thing. When somebody gets offended, who am I to say, you're not allowed to have an emotional reaction to this? You can't tell someone that words don't hurt them when people have been through different experiences and different aspects of their life that cause them a great mental and physical pain, and for you to say, do not have an emotional reaction to this. Right. We're allowed to say whatever we want. So if we go back to the very beginning of this, a simple HR course is not a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
It's an easy thing.
Well, it was a social media training course that they wanted him to take.
Regardless, we're talking about sits in front of a keyboard monitor for like 30 minutes.
But that's not the
point.
point.
Some boxes.
That's not the point. Like if he was, we're talking about Jordan Peterson. Like if he's still practicing, then he might care. Like if you can't practice anymore, then maybe you care. For him, he obviously made a strategic decision, and is probably, I don't speak for him, obviously. I don't know him personally, but he made a decision based on what was better for him, and it is way better for him and his prominence and his career and his profile.
If he hadn't taken the little course, we wouldn't even be talking about any of this.
If he would have taken the course, in Jordan Peterson's words, that would have been the most beta cuck thing that he possibly could have done. Do you agree? Right? Do you agree? And by the way, Don Cherry was not canceled, I don't think. Don Cherry was not canceled for saying you people and talking about how, I mean, obviously he was way off in what he was talking about how like basically immigrants and new Canadians don't want to wear poppies. I just realized right now I'm not wearing my poppy. Oh my gosh, it's on my jacket.
The Don Cherry thing was like a 12th strike.
Well, it
wasn't like
it was a 12th
thing,
strike, and also like, you know, and I say this having seen it a million times in broadcast media as well, like corporate broadcasters know when someone's time is up. And when your time is up and there's a convenient excuse to send you packing and to get rid of a controversy. Right? He was getting a little Biden.
Though. I would watch him, and man, I love Don Cherry. I love Rock'em Sock'em growing up. I couldn't ever imagine Don Cherry leaving without retiring and us having a big send-off on TV. But as you watched him over the years, there was some mental clarity that even when he was, deconstructing, clips of highlights, that he wasn't all there anymore.
Yeah. 100%. I really appreciate these comments. How about from Cheryl, who says a useful analogy is number one. This is part of making amends. She says, here's a useful apology. Number one, this is what I did to harm you. So like acknowledge that you are aware of what you did. Number two, this is why that was not okay. Why I was inconsiderate or insensitive or selfish or dishonest. Number three, I regret it. And number four, what can I do to make it right? I love that. Ms. Katie says Jordan Peterson discovered the grift, and he will never have to walk into a classroom again, which is absolutely 100% true. Tony says, see how men always come to defend an old guy that spews bullshit and racist comments. I'm not defending him. I'm just saying that like he was fired as a business decision. That's all I'm saying. He wasn't canceled. It was a business decision. Alberta Ganger says, I'm happy to be back in a role where I have the opportunity to watch live again. Welcome back to the live chat, Alberta Ganger. It's great. Ms. B goes on to say, Jordan Peterson knew and agreed and made actual caregiver oaths to do no harm. He was informed. He consented. He benefited from it until his ego was triggered. Swanky Frankie, that might be my favorite handle, says Peterson can Swanky Frankie. Peterson can never be wrong, can never learn from past transgressions, and will never attempt to express what he's learned. Gilles says hate speech is by definition harmful, and Canada's charter does not protect someone's hate speech. Travis, by the way, says watching Rock'em Sock'em now just kind of gives me a sick feeling, seeing people unable to get off the ice and their careers ended. To be honest, Travis, I love hockey. I've loved fighting in hockey. But I also, to be honest, I have the same feeling. I saw a fight just the other day. Yeah. And a guy just gets one punch, knocked, falls to the ice unconscious. And I'm like, like with everything we know now, like Tua, your favorite quarterback is back with your favorite team now, the Miami Dolphins.
Of course.
Not wearing, what do they call these helmets now with the pads on them?
Yeah.
And I understand based on culture and understand based on toughness and trust me, I get why Tua wants to play again, but like I can't even believe, I'm just so he's had 3 concussions in 4 seasons, not wearing the as protective of gear as he possibly can, which just makes me sick. But Travis, I'm with you to a degree. Like I think that I am so stuck. I don't know how this turned to fighting in hockey, but I'll take it. I'm so stuck because I do believe that hockey needs an element of players policing themselves, and history has proven it.
Sure.
It's proven it. But at the same time, like my kid plays hockey, and like, do I want my kid? I've friends of mine that have played in the dub, a few of my friends that have played pro that have fought their way up and are now dealing with the consequences of that. Gosh. Do you want your own kid taking repeated blows to the head? I don't think so.
Well, even the other night there was a freeway hit this guy in New Jersey, Buffalo, and it was a clean hit, but like the guy, his feet got swept from under him, and he hit his head first, and immediately was knocked out, and they brought out the stretcher, and it immediately, like, even the guys on the telecast, like, there's no debate anymore. They're like, he clearly hit his head. He's unconscious. And I'm just thinking about, I mean, I didn't play hockey, but, I took power skating. I played some house league stuff. You play hockey every day. You know how hard the ice is when you hit your knee or your elbow on it. When you slam your head on it, head first, like, it's really scary stuff. So I agree with you. I think fighting has, like, it has a best before date. And I think we're not at it yet, but we're coming close. I don't see fighting in 5 years being in hockey.
I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll see. I mean, the league is kind of
what it's going to take?
Itself.
It's going to take one person to get really badly hurt with a fight. And it hasn't happened in a while, but...
If somebody dies in a fight is what you're saying.
Or somebody...
Because injuries have been...
Their career ends, right?
I mean, I think of Steve McIntyre fighting, was it Christoph Oliwa? I think it was a Battle of Alberta. I think it was the same game that Jordan Eberle scored his first goal for the Oilers. This is a real throwback. But, like, you remember Steve McIntyre and Christoph Oliwa square off? Or no, Rice Ivanins, pardon me. I knew it was a European tough guy. But it was Ivanins and McIntyre. And these are two guys. Like, Big Mac was like, what, 6'7", 270? The guy, like, a cattle rancher, basically. And Ivanins, this big, huge, tough guy that had played for the LA Kings, and the Flames had just brought him in, and a fight, basically their first shift, and Ivanins was KO'd and never played another game. And you wonder now what's that like for him.
It takes an instant. It's like Steve Moore. When Steve Moore happened, we all kind of were like,
bit of a different,
but you know what I mean? Like, everyone watching was like, this is amazing, rivalry. And then when the event happens, you're like, holy fuck.
It's the worst, right?
This is
bringing it back to apologizing, bringing it back to whether or not cancel culture is a thing. Cheryl follows up. Remember, Cheryl just gave us the 4 keys to a good apology. She says, however, offending somebody is not necessarily harming them. And she says, that's why I have to put myself in their shoes. Ask myself, was I insensitive? Was I inconsiderate? And if I could have shown up better, I own it. But I appreciate that comment too. Offending somebody is not necessarily harming them. I think there's a lot of room for robust debate on this and for further conversation on this. We want to thank take a second here. We're not done the show yet, but we've got obviously partners that make Real Talk possible every single day, and I want to give them a shout out. How about to those of you that saved, how many? I bet you some of you saved a couple $100 off your groceries. $100, $75, even if you save $20 at Friesen Brothers the first of every month. They're knocking 15% off grocery purchases of $75 or more. They also had that vegan feast over the weekend. And I love knowing that some of you, that may have been your very first time into a Friesen Brothers location. Did you fall in love? Friesen Brothers has the best sourdough in the game. They've got the best Alberta proteins in the game, all cut from their real Alberta butchers. And they've got that Family Essentials flyer that we love. You can find it on their website or in store, helping your family save money. Quality food for low prices every day. I love that they include recipes in this. Plus, they've got their Smart Shopper Savings program. If you sign up for that, they will email you the flyer every single week. They were talking about California Closets and how proud we are to have them sponsoring our live streaming audio app. That's Mixler. California Closets is also the best in the game when it comes to custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home. They do laundry rooms, they do boot rooms, they do garages. If you can dream it up, they can carry it out, and they can do that work on budget. We've worked with them personally as a family almost a decade ago. Still looks like it was installed last week. Beautiful stuff from California Closets. The team at Complete Care Restoration is hard at work in communities across the province right now, including Jasper and other communities impacted by wildfire. But that's not just what they do. We know for a lot of you, in neighborhoods like ours, Johnny, we got these old sewer pipes, and then you got the tree roots that grow through those clay pipes, and then all of a sudden you get a sewer back up, and it's like the nastiest, gnarliest thing you could possibly have in your basement. If you have a situation like that on your hands, do not wait for it to get worse and worse, right? Call Complete Care Restoration right away. They can help you out. Make sure that their team of trained professionals gets to that problem as soon as possible. They treat every project like it's their own. If disaster strikes in your neck of the woods, remember the name Complete Care Restoration. Got a bit of a kind of a tough thing to talk about here, and just wanted to bring the audience up to speed. Kind of a tough thing to talk about. I'm saying that so I don't burst into tears. But we had let you know just a few days ago that our dear friend Kathleen McGee and her beloved husband Adam had checked into palliative care. Kathleen joined us on Real Talk on June 20th of this year, talking about her battle with cancer and how it had metastasized. I remember her laughing about how she had to Google what metastasized meant because she didn't even know. Most people wouldn't until this fight finds them at home and gets real personal. Kathleen refused to stop touring. She traveled across Canada sharing her comedy with everybody. This summer was a big one for her. As some of her favorite comedians had gathered in Edmonton at a couple of different comedy festivals to show her some love and of course, to encourage her in her fight. Following their admission to palliative care just a few days ago, it breaks my heart to let you know that unfortunately we've lost our dear friend Kathleen McGee, and I know that her, based on her appearance on the show, and also, of course, her long and incredible career in comedy, Kathleen had forged a connection with many of you, even if you never had the honor of knowing her personally. Many of you had written into the show after we talked about her checking into palliative care and how they had talked about how they didn't know how much time they have left. I don't know that even they would have suspected that it was only days, but our heart goes out to Kathleen's family. They've experienced significant loss over the past while. To her beloved husband, Adam, they were just a perfect match. And our hearts are shattered for you guys. And I just want to show love, not just to Kathleen, who I'll dearly miss, a friend of nearly 15 years, but also to her family and to everybody else that's out there right now fighting cancer. You got this. And we just wanted to show some love to you and of course, to recognize Kathleen McGee. You can check out her past appearances on Real Talk by way of our YouTube and podcast archives. Her most recent appearance, if you want to watch that full episode, was on the 20th of June. We sat, and Johnny, I think she was in here for a full hour, just talking about her journey and her courage, and just a remarkable human being, and we're going to miss her. We're going to miss her like hell. I also wanted to thank Gilles for putting it on our radar that Senator Murray Sinclair has passed away. This is the former senator, and honestly, I think one of the most respected Canadians, a former senator who led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He was Manitoba's first Indigenous judge. The Anishinaabe senator died early this morning at a Winnipeg hospital, peacefully and surrounded by love. His family said in a statement, the impact of our dad's work reached far across the country and the world, from residential school survivors to law students to those who sat across from him in a courtroom. He was always known as an exceptional listener who treated everybody with dignity and respect. They say we know that stories of his kindness, generosity, and fairness will circulate for generations to come. Justice Murray Sinclair was 73. These are tough things to talk about, but it also reminds me that we've got community here, and Real Talkers, we sure appreciate you and connect with you. In many cases, on a personal level, I had a couple of audience members come up to me at this book launch that I was hosting yesterday. They said, we're not typically in the live chat. They said a lot of times that we'll tune in, but we don't necessarily participate. But it came up, and just sometimes it's a handshake, sometimes it's a hug, sometimes it's a photo. But we just wanted to let you know on behalf of Johnny and myself, I think I can speak for you, Johnny, that we sure appreciate the people that show up in community here every single day. I'm glad that I can wrap on a positive, courtesy of our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. Every week, they give us opportunity to focus on the positives. These are silver linings, random acts of kindness. It's positive reflections presented by Kubi Energy. And I want to give a shout out to everybody that's involved in the pandemic planting project. This was established in 2020 during COVID, and this is a group of about 40 volunteers out of the Metro Edmonton region doing just incredible things. This started on founder David Benesdorf's land in St. Albert David has been a longtime supporter of the Junior Chamber, and that's how he connected with a lot of these folks. Chris Curtola, who's a good friend of mine, and Chris does really amazing work on philanthropy here, including the holiday hamper. We'll talk to you more about that around Christmas. But they all came together. They didn't know a whole lot about farming during COVID, but they just wanted to grow some food for the Edmonton Food Bank in uncertain times. And also they wanted to be able to gather and socially distance outside during COVID. And so they got a large donation in their first year of seed potatoes. And so they started growing those. And so they had like a main garden that was about a third of an acre. And then over time, it's just grown to become a big farm. And get this, Johnny, they have now donated in their 4 years of existence, 5 years, I guess, 430,000 pounds of veggies to the food bank. Okay, these are grown like on location. Mm-hmm. These are grown with love, including over 100,000 pounds this year alone. And every year they're trying to grow, no pun intended, and they're also looking for volunteers to help them tend a row. So each volunteer signs up to tend one row of those veggies. It works out to like an hour or two a week, May through October. Think of the value that you're adding, and think of the personal sense of satisfaction. So those are kind of the basics. You can find them on social media at Pandemic Planting Project, or you can send an email to chriscurtola@gmail.com. You can also send an email to us. We love facilitating these types of relationships. Talk@ryanjesperson.com. You know where you can find us, and we'd be happy to pass you along to them. That's the Pandemic Planting Project. More than 430,000 pounds of veggies donated to Edmonton's Food Bank over the past 5 years. Really remarkable stuff. Thanks to Chris for sharing this with us. You can send us your positive reflection to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We'd be thrilled to feature your good news story here on Real Talk, presented by our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. We've got a big show in store, as you might imagine, friends. As a matter of fact, through this week, of course, Americans will go to the polls coming up on November 5th, and I feel like everybody has their heart in their throat a little bit. November 6th episode of Real Talk is going to be major, and we're really excited about who we have joining us that morning. And, of course, as we approach Remembrance Day, a very special edition of the Real Talk Roundtable coming up Friday of this week. Thank you in advance for sharing this content with folks who you know would benefit from it. Thanks for subscribing and rating our podcast and leaving a comment if you feel so inclined on the YouTube episode. Have a great Monday, everybody. One love.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hicks. General manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Account coordinator Lawrence Derlego. Human resources Lena Shepard. Website design Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Harry Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Randy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project.